Okay, so Billie Eilish just released a new album, as we all know, and so she did an interview talking to Zane Lowe about her previous album, Happier Than Ever, and she said, I think for one, we just didn't put that much into it. That's what it's 16 songs. Nobody needs that many songs, as much as it was coming from this place of like, we're so good, this sounds so good. It was also, at least for me, not knowing at all who I was. Hit Me Hard and Soft is almost the reverse of that. We were like, I don't know if we're making anything good, this might be terrible. Now I want to think about it, I'm like, yeah, but I'm comfortable in who I am now. And then someone quote retweeted it and said, I kind of fucking hate it when artists shit on their old albums to promote their new one. And I will say that I kind of find it annoying whenever artists release a new album and every time they have an album cycle, oh, this is my best album, this is my most personal album. Because at a certain point, it's just not realistic. And sometimes I might genuinely think that, sometimes maybe the label is telling them that. But I mean, Mariah for Butterfly, she said that, and I can tell that she genuinely felt that way because in every interview she was talking about the songs and the details and how much they meant to her and how personal that they were. And it was so hyper specific. So it is kind of annoying in that sense whenever artists do that. And then also her saying that nobody needs that many songs. 16 songs for an album is not bad. If you're talking about 20 or more songs, I can see the argument there. But 13 to 16 songs for an album is a sweet spot, so I kind of disagree with her in that regard. But this really got me thinking to how much do you guys value artistic growth? Is it something that is going to be necessary for you? And I just wanted to have a larger conversation on that because I thought it'd be interesting to talk about. So for me, I think artistic growth is pretty much necessary for an artist. Why would I want to listen to an artist and they basically just release the same album every single time? I want to hear you grow as a songwriter if you do write, or as a singer, or an instrumentalist, or just in some fashion. Switch up the sounds that you're using, switch to the producers and who you're working with. But I want to learn more of you as an artist. I want you to challenge yourself. I don't want you to box yourself in, and I don't want you to make the stuff that you think people want to hear from you, because that's doing a disservice to yourself and us for the audience. So, I'm just not really going to go for someone making the same album 87 times. And so that's that. But, someone with a good, kind of moment in terms of artistic growth, Mariah Carey, obviously. So she's my favorite artist, as mentioned. Her first album, it is a great pop R&B album. She wrote all the songs on here. I really like this album. Vision of Love, Love Takes Time are some of my favorite Mariah Carey songs. Second album, this is whenever she was able to get into co-producing the entire album, because that's something she wanted to do in the first album. They wouldn't really let her, and what she did, they didn't really credit her for. So she co-produces the entire second album, wrote every song on here. Her vocals are absolutely incredible. And so it's very much more so of a soul record and stuff like that. So it's different vibes from the first album, but I still think that it's a great album to listen to. And so after the second album underperformed due to her standards, so basically it was like 8 million worldwide versus 15 million the first album, one number one versus four. Label got concerned, and so they're basically like, we want you to go adult contemporary, aka make music for white people, aka crossover. And so that's what Music Box is. It's a crossover album, and this album was definitely big in Europe, having hits like Without You, and so it just kind of opened her up to white people more. And so like it is what it is. And I feel like in her interview she's basically said that. And so I just feel like if you listen to Music Box and you listen to the first albums or any other album in her discography, then it's way different. That's why I would never recommend this album to get into Mariah, because it's not like anything else she does. And if you go into the rest of her discography expecting anything like that, you're going to be disappointed. It doesn't represent her as an artist. And so basically, some of my favorite songs in here, I really enjoyed A Dream Lover, and she said she wanted a rapper on that, but the label wasn't ready for it, so of course they didn't let that happen. And then you even had stuff like Anytime You Need a Friend, which was a great gospel record. I really enjoyed it, Now That I Know. So, there was some moments on there where she was able to, have a little bit of control there. But, there's a lot of ballads on the album. Like I said, there is her version on Without You. And so it's just different for the first two albums. It really is. Like, listen to Emotions in this back to back and tell me it wasn't whitewashed. And I've been saying this, and, people disagree with me. It is what it is. But I mean, watching her interviews at a time, listening to the album, coming to my own conclusions, I'm sorry, that's just what it was giving to me. And I mean, hey, it paid off, 28 million worldwide, and it is what it is. But that's kind of just my opinion on Music Box album. Made a deep dive on her on my YouTube channel, Anastasia25. I talked about her first 10 years of her career basically, and just my thoughts there. So if you want to know more about why I think what I think about Music Box, then definitely check out that video. But yeah, I basically blame Kwame Matola because he was the one who was very controlling of her career and everything, because she was married to him and everything. And so he was very controlling of her sound and stuff that she could put out and stuff like that. That's why she expressed herself a lot in the remix. Christmas album, she was able to kind of get more into her roots yet again, having a lot of, R&B flair on stuff like Jesus, Oh Wonderful Child, which I really enjoyed. All I Want for Christmas Is You, which is a pop hit that she wrote and I really enjoy. Miss You Most at Christmas Time was another original, and she also wrote Jesus Born on This Day. And, a lot of great covers on it. Best Christmas album of all time. And Daydream, this was a pop R&B moment yet again. And so this was her changing her sound up a little bit with Walter. She has her first official collaboration with Boyz II Men on this album, Once We Day, number 1, 16 weeks. You also have the pop hits such as Fantasy, and, I really enjoyed Always Be My Baby, and, that's a classic in its own right, as well as Underneath the Stars and A Long Ago, for example. Butterfly, this was mainly R&B and hip-hop, her kind of mashing them together, and she was able to be more of herself as an artist because she left Tommy Mottola, and he was the one basically kind of controlling her music and what she could make and who she could work with and all of those things. And if you know one thing about Mariah Carey's career, he just is very annoying to me. But I love this album. It was personal for her. There's a lot of great cuts on it. Honey was a great lead single. Butterfly the Song was one of my favorite Mariah Carey songs. And I also really enjoyed stuff like 4th of July, which is very reminiscent of Under the Stars. The Roof, Breakdown, featuring Crazy Bone and Wishbone of Bone Thugs and Harmony. Outside, which was about being biracial. So she pushed her pen forward. And I think that the vocal layering on this album is incredible. It's just a personal moment. It's great. I love the production on here. She was ahead of her time. And it's worth noting that whenever she released Butterfly, there was a lot of people saying like, oh, why is she getting so R&B now and blah, blah, blah. Like, she didn't start off as an R&B artist with a song like Vision of Love. Like, let's be serious for a moment. And people felt like she was just changing too drastically and all those things. But she basically said, I'm incorporating what I was doing to the remixes into my records and stuff like that, because Tommy wouldn't let her, do certain things to her songs. So the remixes is where she could really express herself and stuff like that. And so Butterfly, that's exactly what she did. So she did get some backlash for that as well. And, the tide turned on her, but it was ultimately worth it. And that's why I say that Mariah Carey still is around and why she has longevity is because she didn't let herself, get stuck in the 90s with the adult contemporary. She knew when to move on and incorporate, more R&B into her music. And Music Box was just a slight deviation from what she already does. So it just really annoyed me when people act like Mariah Carey just really made music for white people when she never did to begin with. And that was a slight deviation. That wasn't her idea. And I blame the label and Tommy Mottola, but I digress. Rainbow, people do too much on it, but it's a great album in my opinion. It's of the time. She recorded in 3 months because she wanted to get on the contract. There's great stuff like Heartbreaker, Crybaby. I love her cover of Against All Odds. Can't Take That Away. Bliss. Like, y'all do too much on it. Glitter, this was her trying to go back to the 80s and just like having a soundtrack based off of that moment. Tommy, Sabotage, the movie, and all that stuff, as we know. It's good for what it is. It's not one of my favorite Mariah albums, but it's a good album. It's grown on me. Charm Bracelet, this was her, having a softer vocal approach. A lot of people said, oh, she's whisper singing, but if you heard the artist whisper singing now, their version of that and Mariah's version of that's different. But great stuff on here. I love The One, for example. That's one of my favorite Mariah Carey songs. Through the Rain was a good song on this album. Lullaby, My Saving Grace, Subtle Invitation, Yours. So there's a lot to like. Emancipation Mimi, her big comeback album. And so We Belong Together, number 1, 14 weeks. And then I really enjoyed It's Like That. Shake It Off is definitely a favorite for me as well. Circle, Stay the Night. And so she really needed that album. Everyone thought she was cooked after the last 2 albums because they didn't really perform to her standards commercially, but they weren't really flops in the general scheme of music and stuff like that. But she came back. It's like the best-selling album in 2005. And this is a little album that solidified her as a legend at this point. So she really needed this album. I feel like was them trying to replicate this album. And I like the album. I just don't think it's as good. But, there's a lot of stuff I like on here, such as Side Effects. I Stay in Love is one of my favorite songs on this album. I Wish You Well. I'll Be Loving You a Long Time. There's a lot to like. Memoirs. This was more of a laid back album. She worked with The Dream on this one. So I like it a lot. Obsessed, a smash hit. We Know It, We Love It. And then I also really enjoyed stuff like Candy Bling, The Impossible, Inseparable, etc. Merry Christmas to You, second Christmas album, great stuff like When Christmas Comes, Oh Santa, though I do prefer the remix. First Noel, Born as the King interlude, etc. Mia and Mariah, underrated album, and this is a more personal album for her as well. And Cry is one of my favorites. Make It Look Good was a great moment. You Don't Know What to Do featuring Wale. The Art of Letting Go was personal. Caution, we won't talk about a reset. Then we talk about Caution because this is so modern and it came out 2018. It still sounds great. And so what I like with Mariah is her ability to adapt with the times as well, and just make stuff that makes sense for her, but it still sounds really good for the time. A lot of artists in her era try to do it and it just doesn't work, but for Mariah, she always gets it. I love GTFO, Great Firestarter, 8th Grade is one of my favorites. Give Me Life with Slick Rick and Blood Orange. Yeah. Only song I don't go for is Stay Long Love You. It's just not really a favorite for me, but I really do enjoy it. And so, yeah, I didn't expect to talk about Mariah Carey for this long, but that's kind of a basic rundown of her discography and stuff like that. But, she was always going to change her look as well. And so I feel like overall in her discography, she grew as a songwriter. And, the peak of that was Butterfly, in my opinion. But Memoirs is underrated and how funny that the songwriting was. It doesn't take itself too seriously. And that's what I really liked about Memoirs. As a singer, she just has so many different textures and tones of her voice. And if you love Mariah Carey, then you know that every single album is going to sound different. Her voice always sounds different. So that's what I like, is because she learned how to change within that and do so many cool things with it. And I really liked her tone during Rainbow era specifically. And I feel like it is underrated. A lot of people go out for Daydream and Charm Bracelet in terms of the vocal performances on there. And just as an artist, she worked with a bunch of different producers and stuff like that. Like, she literally didn't start working with Jermaine until Daydream. And that's whenever they did, Always Be My Baby and stuff like that. And so she's also working with Big Jim Wright. On Rainbow, she worked with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. And, she has, some producer credits as well. She directed 2 of her music videos in A Fantasy and Always Be My Baby, and a lot of people don't know that. So this is what I mean when I talk about artistic growth that I really like. And I feel like the songs are still really strong at the end of the day. And so that's kind of the gist of Mariah Carey's artistic growth. Another great example of artistic growth is Beyonce. I mean, look at the material, making great R&B albums. I and Sasha Fierce was her crossover album. And I made a whole video kind of talking about why Hive doesn't go for this album, and just talking about the crossover album and saying that it kind of serves the same purpose to Beyonce's discography as Music Box serves to Mariah. And I'll link it below if you guys want to watch it. My justification for it was an R&B album that was really great, and I appreciate it because EDM was really popping at the time and Beyonce did something different, and that's why it still sounds great. Self-titled is self-titled, now music is released on Fridays because of Beyonce and the genre bending that she did on the album. We have to talk about it. Lemonade is a great album. Renaissance with her doing that dance and house music and all that stuff. It was just great, and she still has great R&B songs like Cuff It. Cowboy Carter, that is her going country, and I really do enjoy the album, especially with stuff like Bodyguard, American Requiem, Tyrant, really great album. So what I appreciate about Beyonce is she always reinvents herself, and she just doesn't make what she thinks that people want to hear from her. And so many people, we want the old Beyonce. Okay, well then go listen to it. Beyonce would not be at the same place that she is in her career if she just made the same thing. People want artists to change. People want artists to really care about their craft. And Beyonce, I mean, she just does it every single time with her look, with her music, with the producers. And yeah, Beyonce is one of my favorites, so I have to mention. Janet Jackson is another great example for this as well. I mean, first 2 albums, she wasn't really involved in them per se, but then Control, that's when she started working with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. And we got a lot of great albums after that. 21 Yo, I'm Not Looking at You, that is actually her worst album, right beside the first 2. But I mean, Velvet Rope, a classic, obviously. So is Control, so is A Rhythm Nation, All For You. A lot of people go for Janet, and that album in particular, not one of my favorites, but I get its impact. And so, I mean, yeah, what she was able to do with that New Jack Swing, she's an incredible songwriter. She is underrated as a singer, but I just appreciate her. The Janet album is important, just because that's whenever she was, changing up her image a little bit more, getting more sexual with her music and stuff like that. So it's just an important shift for her in that. And the Velvet Rope was more alternative R&B, her getting more personal. All For You was just a great pop album. All these albums, for the most part, are important in some way or another. Appreciate what Britney Spears did too, because the first 2 albums were definitely teen pop albums, and then the 3rd album, she's even having a song like I'm Not a Girl, Not Yet a Woman, but also I'm a Slave for You and Boys, and I don't really go for that song, but that song is on there. And then Overprotected and Cinderella is one of my favorite Britney songs. She did those with Max Martin. Like I said, that should have been a single, but that was definitely a shift in sound and imaging for her, and I appreciate what the album's done for her. In The Zone, she was more involved on that one as well, doing Me Against the Music with Madonna and stuff like that. Blackout, a pop bible, we know it, we love it. Why Should I Be Sad is one of my favorite Britney songs. I absolutely love Circus. People don't go for it enough in my opinion, but it's always been one of my favorites. Out From Under, and I also really enjoy Unusual You, Blur, stuff like that. So yeah, we had moments. I don't really go up for Femme Fatale and Britney Jean, I'll be honest with you, but she wasn't really involved in those albums creatively. She did bounce back with Glory, I will say that, but yeah, I appreciate what Britney did in terms of the imaging. Another great moment in terms of artistic growth is Taylor Swift. She started off making country music, and then Red was country pop, and then 1989 was a pop album. She went alternative with Folklore and Evermore. So, yeah, Taylor Swift has had multiple genres in her music. I feel like she's particularly grown as a songwriter. I think her strong points in terms of songwriting would be a Red, a Folklore, Evermore, probably as well. And we also had just so many great songs that Taylor Swift has made. 1989 was the album that actually had me get into her, and it's one of my favorite pop albums ever, with stuff like Wildest Dreams and Blank Space. I even really like Shake It Off, though a lot of people don't go up for it. And so there was a lot to like on there, and so I just really appreciate Taylor Swift as a songwriter, and I like her artistic growth. Tortured Poets Apartment, it did get kind of stagnant. It's the album she made that people feel like she's been making the whole time, and that's just unfortunate. You know, the album is a disappointment. I'll expand on that on YouTube, Anastasia 25, on another video. And, you know, there's that there. Some of Taylor's versions haven't been the best, you know, I'll be honest with you on that. But generally, I think she has a solid discography. There's so many songs of hers that I love. Begin Again is one of my favorite Taylor Swift songs. And I love The Best Day. I love Miss Americana and The Heartbreak Prince, The Last Great American Dynasty. I just feel like she's grown as a songwriter, as a storyteller. And Folklore is what brought me back to her, because I didn't tune in for Reputation or Lover. And I thought that was just such a strong album in terms of songwriting. And it was very cohesive as well. So I think Taylor Swift is one of the blueprints in terms of artistic growth, and I just really appreciate what she's done with her career. With Ariana Grande, I don't think her career would be the same without a sweetener. She needed it. Because at a certain point, as an artist, you have to do something experimental with your music. You have to take a creative risk in some form. And so, what I think that Ariana Grande did with Sweetener is she just made really refreshing, great pop music, working with Pharrell, who's always going to push, you know, that moment with stuff like Rem, for example, which I really enjoyed, working with Max Martin and Ilya on A No Tears Left to Cry, which was a great lead single. It's still refreshing to listen to. She had God is a Woman off of this record as well. I love Get Well Soon. That is one of my favorite Ariana Grande songs, and the vocal layering on that, absolutely insane. And so I just feel like she needed it, because a lot of people were going to pigeonhole her as, oh, you only make this basic pop and R&B music, and a lot of her stuff hasn't really aged the best. It just kind of sounds like of its time, but it's still good music. But I think Sweetener has actually aged really well, and I think that it was smart for her to release it at its time. And, you know, it's her fourth album. Her career is not the same without Sweetener. I always liked Sweetener from the beginning. A lot of people didn't go up for it, and some people like Thank You Next better, but I just think artistically Sweetener was a more ambitious album, and I enjoyed it more, and I think she needed. A lot of people did not really go for Lorde Solar Power. Again, I feel like I'm one of the only people who actually like this album, but Solar Power, the song, I enjoyed it. Stoned at the Nail Salon was a eat. Helena Troy, Hold No Grudge, Oceanic Feeling. So there was a lot for me to like on this album. It was a little bit different for her sound, and I thought the song was going to be better than Melodrama, but it isn't. You know, I can be honest about that now, but it's good. It's good. I think people do a little bit too much on it, but a lot of people, including her fans, really do not like this album. I'm curious to see what she does next. Another album the fan base doesn't really go up for an artist, Fiona Apple, Extraordinary Machine. This is one of my favorite albums by her, and again, it's different from her first two albums sonically. And there is a version that leaked with different production, but I just never listened to that out of respect to her, and I just really like the standard version of this album anyways. Some of my favorite songs, Extraordinary Machine, the song, very relatable to me. Get Him Back is like my favorite Fiona Apple song to be released, so she definitely ate that one up as well. And yeah, this is a really great album in my opinion. Justin Timberlake with Man of the Woods. This is an example of when experimentation for an artist goes bad. This is when he wanted to get a little country. And so I just feel like Justin Timberlake kind of whitewashed himself, which is ironic because he's a white man. But when you kind of make R&B music, when you're working with Timbaland and then you give me Man of the Woods, yeah, this was not it. And yes, I know that he worked with the Neptunes on this album. Do I think that it sounds very good for the most part? No. You know, we had great stuff on here, like Breeze Off the Pond is one of my favorite Justin Timberlake songs, especially that little part at the end. What I Look Like, Trying to Hide My Life, like that whole part is definitely a jam. I love Higher Higher. Wave, I think that's one of the better songs of this album, but no shade, I don't really listen to that a whole lot. Midnight Summer Jam was a great moment. But for every song like that, you're going to have a song like Supplies and Filthy, and that collaboration with Alicia Keys, that was trash. I don't go for Say Something, even though it's one of the more popular songs in this album. I think it sounds very bland. So Justin Timberlake basically just got gentrified, the gentrification of Justin Timberlake. This is not really what I go to him for. I think that this album was a disappointment in retrospect to his entire discography, and he did bounce back with his new album, Everything I Thought It Was, and I'm thankful for that because I couldn't listen to anything like this. You know, you tried and you failed. And so, you know, it is what it is, but I think that he should stick to making R&B music and working with Timbaland. So that's basically my gist on why artistic growth is so important. Some examples of it working out, some examples of it not working out. Let me know what you think down below in the comments on what Billie said in general and what you think about artistic growth. Is it necessary for you? Is it not? I think part of it depends on artists. I feel like a lot of times you can still grow in a way with keeping within your sound and just changing like minor things on that. So I think it also has to depend on on the artist and, how subtle the changes are and everything. But you have to take an artistic risk at the end of the day to a certain extent. But let me know what you guys think down below in the comments.